Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today is, I guess, what I would call a State of the Purge collection. We could call it the 2023 edition since, even though we're a few months into 2024, I haven't actually gotten rid of any watches since the end of 2023. But I actually thought it might be fun to go ahead and recapture sort of the watches I've been through. By my count, since I've been collecting, I've had 14 that have actually left my collection for various reasons. So I thought I'd go ahead and just briefly cover each of those in a compilation so you can see kind of what I learned from my process of owning them and what my decision making was and what lessons were taught by those watches. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and start with a Cartier. I had a Santos 100 large. This watch I traded away as part of a massive trade to get my Longo 1. The Santos was very comfortable to wear, but for a dress watch, and you could consider it something of a sporty dress watch, but I mean, it did come on an alligator strap and all of that. It's, the older model, the Santos 100, kind of that early 2000s vibe where bigger was better. And while it wore very well because the case itself was curved, it was huge. So it could slide under a cuff and all of that. It was well configured. Cartier knows how they're doing the design, but the bottom line is, if I was to get back into a Santos, I would want something either just a lot smaller or I like the more modern, sporty iterations versus what the Santos 100 looks like. So ultimately, it just wasn't getting worn as much. I saw a dress watch I liked the idea of a lot better, and I decided that really big dress watches were not the route I wanted to go. And that was a learning experience on another watch that is going to come up here in a bit. Next watch I'm going to talk about is a Glashütte Original. I had a Panomatic Lunar, not one of the current iterations either. I had one of the older dial colorways, a blue, a really nice blue. Also came on bracelet, full bracelet. I obviously got this one used, given when I acquired it. But unfortunately, this was one of the fastest watches to leave my collection. In fact, if I remember correctly, I don't have a single State of the Collection video with it because it came in after I had finished one State of the Collection and it went out before I did the next one. Again, reason this one went, I got a reference back to the Longo 1. Asymmetrical dial on both instances. I got the Glashütte as part of a trade that I did. I liked it. I remember it was one of the few watches that received at least one compliment out and about. And I liked a lot about it. I knew I wouldn't wear it very much. If I had another asymmetrical dial, the Longo 1 was a grail piece. The Panomatic was seen as just a more affordable approach to getting into a similar dial layout, though there were some things about the Geo that I liked better in terms of the configuration. But the bottom line is I don't regret letting that one go. I only regret that I bought it. And then after I had it, I was like, with enough of these watches plus cash, I can get into something I really, really want. So it was one of those more compromised pieces. I have thought about getting a different version of a more modern version, perhaps at some point, because it did have a moon phase, which my Longa does not. And I don't have any watch with a moon phase at this point. And that moon phase looked really good and I did enjoy it. So that's probably the only real regret I have about letting that watch go. Next watch I want to talk about is the one Grand Seiko I've had, the SBGA 283. I loved this dial. This might be the closest thing to a regret release that I did. I traded this one away again. This is very convenient. I didn't mean to go in this order, but I let go of 5 watches in the process to get the Longo 1. And that's how I was able to handle the cash outlay, is I traded away so many watches at the same time. And this was a victim of that process. Spring drive movement watch, as I noted, I really like the dial colorway. It plays with the light extremely well. The bottom line was, it's a sporty style dress watch, and I was sort of purging out a lot of those watches that were filling the dress watch function. In fact, I got rid of everything except my Reverso that I considered for my purposes a dress watch in order to get the Longo 1. So it just was a victim of that. I've not really thought about getting this colorway again. I have considered something maybe in titanium out of Grand Seiko. So I've played with the idea of getting another spring drive watch, maybe one where I could actually see the movement, because this version was a closed case back. Bracelet wasn't a very good experience though, so that's part of the thing that's always sort of kept me away from jumping back into Grand Seiko. Next watch is the Hamilton Khaki Pilot Pioneer Auto Chrono. And if you've watched this channel at all, you almost assuredly have heard me complain about this watch. I ended up giving this watch away as a gift to someone I thought could wear it a lot better. But this taught me so many things about watches and what I do not like. This was my first mechanical chronograph I've ever owned. In fact, I've only ever had one other mechanical chronograph since then. It's my Zenith Chronomaster Original, a watch which I greatly enjoy. But this watch, this Hamilton Khaki Pilot, hated it. Hated so much about it. Hated how thick it was. It was a shop-worn watch. Within a month, the minutes subdial would not properly reset when I would use the chronograph. Got sent in, under warranty, got serviced, took a couple months, get the watch back, same day. Breaks in the same way. Like the minute reset issue would fail at the same exact point and everything. So it was like, it felt like they didn't fix anything. They had just reset all of the hands. So back it went again. 2 months later, finally came back. Didn't seem to be broken anymore. But that really poisoned me to the watch a great deal to have to service it that quickly. I try not to be like that because obviously these things happen. This is not the only watch I've had to have go in for service. Even one that I just almost immediately got, having to go back for something. But it just, as long as it was away and then, it's back for one day and out again it goes. The Valjoux based movement, I think it was the H31 powers this watch, but it's a Valjoux based chronograph movement. Hated the rotor wobble. I didn't realize there were rotors that did wobble and you could feel them. It felt like a helicopter on the wrist. Other than the strap, there was basically nothing I really liked about this watch. The colorway of the dial I did. I mean, obviously there was an aesthetic that I liked to it, but after I got this watch, I got that aforementioned Grand Seiko, which had the champagne-style dial in a much, much more attractive package. The cutout date window wasn't good on the Hamilton. It just did not work for me for a variety of reasons, but it didn't wear well at all. So functionally, it was just, even if it wasn't a mechanical nightmare that had put me through my paces on dealing with a service center, it was not going to stay in the collection. I couldn't stand it enough to do that. Next watch, IWC. I had a Portuguese. This is their hand-wound reversed Panda. This, before they called it the Portugueser line, it was running for a while as a Portuguese line. Used watch, pocket watch movement, very attractive dial, but a very large watch. Now, the Portugueses are meant to wear large. This was part of that trade towards the Longa 1, so that's the primary reason it had to go. I do like this dial configuration a great deal. However, with the pocket watch-sized movement in it and the relatively small crown, this did have a problem with hand winding in that it was painful to hand wind. It would, like, the crown would cut into my finger and thumb hand winding it. Especially if I wanted to put a full wind into it. And bear in mind, this is a hand wind only watch. It doesn't have an automatic rotor to wind it. So every day I wanted to wear it, I would have to wind it. I'd have to grab a microfiber cloth or use the tail of my shirt or whatever and wind this so that I could fully wind it. And I think that was just a victim of the fact that the crown was too small for the size of the movement. But they chose to do it for the aesthetics. I get it, but it made it an unpleasant winding experience. The only hand wind watch I have ever had that was not fun to wind. And they should be fun to wind. So for that reason alone, I needed to get rid of it. I thought about getting into the Portuguesers, which are smaller and have wristwatch-sized movements powering them, because I know that won't be the same issue. But again, it's just not the direction I've turned to at this point for dress watches. Next watch, my Marathon GPM. This is a field watch. I got it because I kind of liked this dial configuration. You often know it for the khaki Hamilton, but I didn't want to get that because everyone seems to go and get the Hamilton. So, plus I'd already owned a Hamilton because I'd already had that Pilot Chrono I talked about. So I got this one with the tritium loom and all of that. It's a small watch. It wore well. The bottom line is I just didn't wear it. I realized there's no part in my life where wearing a field watch makes any sense. So I went ahead and I sold it and moved it along. Next watch is Ming. It's the collaboration watch. It was the 1709 Ming and Messina Lab collaboration with the black dial. This watch, there's a whole story and I have a video about, there was a whole thing on the sale and everything. And there was an initial issue. So this had to go back for servicing because the hour hand didn't work right given how they have it mounted and some confusion regarding changes that Ming wasn't aware of with the movement. The reason I ended up getting rid of this and I ended up trading it towards another watch is that the crown on the watch would cut into my wrist every time I would reach into my pocket. It was just really sharp. I've had some where, you'll get the little red mark from where your hand bends and hits the watch, but it's not uncomfortable per se. This one was uncomfortable. It was painful. So it needed to go. It wasn't at the peak of the Ming demand, but the Ming watches were still pretty easy, especially a limited model like this, to trade for more than what I paid for it. So its value towards a new watch was just worth it, given the discomfort of wearing it. Unfortunate, though, I really did enjoy the dial quite a bit of that series, but because I know that crown is painful, I just can't consider getting back into Ming because I don't think they've changed their crown up at all. Next to watch brand would be Rolex. Oyster Perpetual, the 114-200. I had a green dial version, 34mm watch with a cushion case. They're not as small as the current 34mm Oyster Perpetuals. This is the watch that kind of got me into watch collecting, so I appreciate that, but it needed to be moved along because I ended up seeing other watches that I wanted. I didn't wear it as much. I was wearing my Rolex Explorer 2, which I've had for almost 20 years now, instead of that one. The size, it felt really good. The bracelet was great. It was a little small for my taste. This was my first time I attempted a watch that was that small. I thought it looked all right on my wrist, but again, I saw some other things that I was interested in, so I actually traded that watch towards something else. Next watch brand would be Rotary, the Super 7 Scuba. Dive watch, orange dial, one of the best loomed watches I've ever had. In fact, I'd say the only watch I've had, it was at the time the best loomed watch I had ever owned. Since then, my Stova Flieger Type B has better loom, which you would expect out of a Flieger. But this watch had really good loom. I actually went swimming in this watch, which is something I generally don't do with watches. I just ended up with too many dive watches. So as I was in the process of wanting to get an Omega Seamaster 300M. So I actually gifted this watch away to someone else. Next watch, Tissot, the PRX, the quartz version, and not the 35mm version. I don't remember if the 35mm version had been announced yet or not, but if it had been, it had only just been announced. This watch just wore a little too big for me. I was always grabbing my G-Shock when I needed a quartz ready-to-go watch. So even though it has a much more dressy aesthetic, the PRX just wasn't getting wrist time. I got it to see how I liked integrated sports watches, and it was like, okay, I think they're fine, so I know I don't hate them, but I went ahead and sold it because it just wasn't getting enough wrist time. And nowadays, it definitely wouldn't, because I have a Citizen high-accuracy quartz watch that if I needed a dressier, ready-to-grab and go, that's what I would grab instead of the PRX anyway. Tudor. Actually, I have a couple of watches that have come and gone as Tudors. The first one I'll talk about is the 1926. Very attractive watch. I promote this watch a lot if you want to get into Tudor without going a lot in terms of dollars. These watches, I think, retail around $2,000, but you can readily find them gray market, so unworn, for closer to $1,500. I just had a lot of other time plus date watches. So even though I loved how it wore, the bracelet was decent, better than some other thing, like better than I feel than Grand Seiko or Omega, but it wasn't a great, it's not like a Rolex bracelet. But as a substitute to a Datejust, I think it's excellent. This version, I don't think they're heat blued indices or hands, but they play with the light very, very well. It's an extremely attractive watch, and for an automatic, quite thin. It's under 10 millimeters. So I plug it a lot. It's just, I have a lot of watches that fill that sort of role, so I ended up selling it. The other Tudor I had was the Black Bay Bronze, the full-sized one with the black dial with the gilt markings on it. Very large watch. Largest watch I ever had in terms of lug-to-lug, I believe. This was part of that trade towards the Longa one. And again, I was trying to get out of having so many dive watches after getting the 300M, so it ended up on the chopping block. Next watch after that would be my Vostok Komardersky. It's the one with a little submarine on it, blue dial watch. It was first watch I ever actually regulated myself. Fun watch to have. Why'd I get rid of it? The date window alone is the reason to get rid of that watch. It's a big hassle. It's not a quick set. So I would have probably kept a watch longer from Vostok if it was a no date, but it had a date. I wasn't wearing it, again, kind of like the field watch thing. I just wasn't putting wrist time on it. I actually gave this away. The person who designed the logo, the current logo for this channel, he didn't charge me any money for it. I actually sent him a little goodie box of stuff as a thank you. And I don't think he had a watch other than like an Apple Watch. So I gave him the Vostok as a gift, as a thank you for helping me out with my channel. And the last watch I'm going to go ahead that I have in my list here is my Zodiac Super Seawolf. This is the watermelon colorway. Kind of like the Hamilton, this had some maintenance issues. There was a lot of dust and like misapplied paint on the dial. Plus, it was very inaccurate. I tried to regulate it myself. The regulating stud broke off of the movement. I voided the warranty opening it up. I still contacted the distributor and said, hey, I opened this up. I broke this stud off. Can I get a new movement or something? And they were like, given your issues with the dial, we'll just let you trade this back in. We've heard a lot of these complaints about Zodiac. So they said they would look in their boxes and find the nicest looking dial they had, which still had dust and a little bit of paint issue on it, though the paint issue was only detectable under a loop. I will say one of the best, especially on the more entry luxury end, one of the best bracelet experiences. There's like an elastic aspect to their butterfly clasp. Very, very comfortable to wear. So bracelet was great. Bezel was great. The watch is a fun colorway. The second one they got me was decent timekeeping and all the rest of it. I really liked the silver dial on this a lot. But just like the Black Bay Bronze, this was and the Rotary Super 7, this was, hey, I don't need this many dive watches. Again, the Omega was coming in, so I went ahead and sold this one to make space. But anyway, that's my state of the purge. Any of these watches you think I should have kept? Any of them you think I definitely needed to get rid of? Go ahead and leave your comments. I'll enjoy reading those. And otherwise, if you enjoy what I do here, click subscribe and you'll be automatically notified. And I'll talk to you all on the next video. Take care, everybody.